In the last episode, we talked about guilt. That quiet ache caregivers carry even when they're doing their best. Today, I want to talk about another part of caregiving that's harder to name. The emotional wounds that come from the person you're caring for. There were many times in the hospital when Phil ordered me out of his room. I would walk in trying to help, adjusting his blankets, talking to the nurses, making sure he had whatever he needed, and suddenly he'd snap. "Get out! Just leave." It wasn't anger. It was overwhelm. It was fear. It was a man whose world had collapsed so quickly that he didn't know where to put those pieces. I remember standing in the hallway just trying to catch my breath. I was doing everything I could to help him, but he was too emotionally destroyed to listen. His body was failing, his independence was gone, and I was the closest person to aim all those fears toward. Those moments hurt deeply, but they weren't about me. They were about the storm he was trapped inside. And then came the moment I'll never forget, the one that pierced me in a way I didn't expect. He looked at me, tired and scared, and said, "It would be easier for you if I was gone." Even now, those words, they still echo. Not because they were true, but because they came from a place so deep of fear, it had nowhere else to go. Caregiving changes the emotional landscape between two people. You're both hurting. You're both exhausted. You're both trying to survive something bigger than either of you. And sometimes the person you love most becomes the person who wounds you. Not out of cruelty, but out of desperation. Caregivers, they just don't talk about these moments. We talk about the exhaustion, the frustration, the guilt, the grief, how overwhelmed we are, but not the wounds, not the sentences that land like stones, not the accusations that come from fear, confusion, or illness. But these moments, they do matter. They shape us, they stretch us, they leave marks we carry quietly. Sometimes the hardest part of caregiving isn't the physical work. It's the emotional weight of loving someone who is hurting so deeply that their pain spills over onto you. And here's the truth caregivers need to hear. Their words were about fear. They're not about you, not about your failure. You are doing the best that you can. I felt a similar ache recently with my mom. She was having a difficult day, confused, restless, unsure. At one point, she looked at me with frustration and said, "You're not listening to me." I was, and I had been, but her words felt scrambled to her, and I was the closest person to lash out to. Not because she meant it, but because her fear needed somewhere to land. As caregivers, we absorb so much. We absorb confusion, we absorb fear, we absorb frustration, we absorb those words that weren't meant for us, but were spoken in our direction. A tired heart questions itself. A loving heart keeps showing up day after day. Caregivers live in that tension every single day. If you've ever been hurt by something your loved one said, if you've ever carried an emotional bruise no one else could see, if you've ever wondered why their words cut so deeply, you're not alone. There's a truth caregivers rarely speak out loud. The people we love, they can sometimes wound us the most, not because they want to, but because they are fighting battles we cannot see. When someone is scared, sick, declining, or losing pieces of themselves. Their words often come from a place of fear, not intention. And fear has a way of lashing out. Their fear is not your failure. Their pain is not your fault. Their words are not a reflection of your love. They're a reflection of their struggle. Caregiving places you in the crossfires of someone else's emotions. You become the safe place where their frustration lands, the person closest to the storm they're trying to just survive. And even when you understand that, even when you know it's the illness talking, or the confusion talking, or the grief talking, it still hurts. Because you're human, because you're loving them with everything that you have, because you're carrying so much already. You are loving someone through something so incredibly hard, and sometimes that love, it gets heavy. Sometimes love means absorbing words that bruise. Sometimes love means holding steady when someone you care for is unraveling. Sometimes love means forgiving things that still sting when you think about them later. And if you've ever walked into the bathroom, shut the door, and let yourself cry because of something they said, that, my friend, does not make you weak. It makes you real. It makes you a caregiver who is just doing hard work. It's difficult. You're living in a world that rarely sees the emotional cost. You are not alone in this. You are not the one carrying invisible bruises. And you are not failing. You are loving someone through their fear, their decline, their confusion, their grief. And sometimes love gets heavy. Here is a scripture encouragement that I hope will carry you through when you are discouraged. Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. God doesn't step back when caregiving gets emotionally painful. He steps closer. He sees the wounds no one else can possibly see. He strengthens the places where your heart feels thinned. Just reach out to him. He is always with you. And here's something to try. When a painful moment happens, pause and ask yourself, is this about me, or is this about their fear? Most of the time, it's their fear talking. Naming that truth and remembering that helps soften the sting and protect your heart. Before we close, I want to remind you of this. You are carrying more than most people will ever possibly understand. You are loving someone through fear, illness, and uncertainty. You are doing such important work even when it doesn't feel that way. Give yourself some grace today because you deserve it. Thank you for joining me today. I hope something you heard gave you strength for the next step in your journey. Remember, you are doing meaningful work even when no one sees it, and you are never alone. If you'd like to connect or share your caregiver's story, you can find me in the Caregivers Gathering Place of Hope on Facebook. It's a community where you don't have to pretend to be strong all the time. And if you'd like more encouragement, my cookbook on Amazon, Comfort and Care, A Caregiver's Cookbook, offers both easy recipes and everyday hope. I'd love to hear what part of today's episode spoke to your heart. Feel free to email me anytime. I would love to hear from you. The Caregivers Table at yahoo.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time at The Caregivers Table.